Hello everybody, an enormous pleasure to welcome you here. What I'd like to do is set the agenda as to why HS2, HS3 matters. Broadly speaking, I want to suggest to you three things. Firstly, that our model of the state has failed, our economic model has failed, and as a result, both of those have failed the north of our great country. It's not an accident that in the independence vote, those who voted for Scottish nationalism and to sunder the most successful union the world has ever known, voted in those areas that had above average levels of unemployment and some of the highest levels or indices of deprivation. They were people who felt that the Westminster settlement had abandoned them and they were forgotten. And it won't surprise you to know that many people in the north of England feel exactly the same thing. What has happened? What has gone wrong? Broadly speaking, I want to suggest to you that we have followed London-centric, southeastern politics and economics that has done very well for London. It's made it the most important global city in the world, something I welcome as a patriot and someone who's terribly proud of our country and wants its great gifts to be transformed and multiplied across the world. But it's done terrible damage to the settlements in other parts of our nation. The state, as I said, is one of the things that has failed. We have created a siloed model. Actually, most of our modern state is set up on socialist grounds. And that's the old socialism that said, in order to achieve equality and equity, we have to give the same thing in the same way to everybody. That has resulted in the postcode lottery that we have today, where life expectancy in our country can vary by up to 30 years. Different arms of the state conflict. They fight over what's right to do in anything from crime to public investment. The overheads of each part of the state imposes enormous costs on our frontline budgets. And we produce an ineffective state that has completely been unable to transform the economic lives and opportunities and potential of our great northern city-states. Equally, the economic model that we've followed has created great prosperity in the southeast, but has too readily written off whole regions of the north and vast numbers of our fellow citizens from having any hope or any future which they could enjoy and pass on to their children. In too many parts of the north, it's lives of quiet desperation as things get worse. For me, the most telling point, and I remember this from David Blunkett under New Labour, where he said something that still remains true. The most telling indicator of what will happen to a human being in our country is the postcode where they're born. That outcompetes every other social indicator. And for those born on the wrong side of the tracks or the wrong part of our social and economic geography, the results are economically serious to the point of being fatal, both for them and for their children and for their children's children. We fundamentally need a new economic and social settlement for those parts of our country that haven't benefited from the growth and prosperity that otherwise these last decades have engendered. You may know and may have heard of the report ResPublica published 2 weeks ago, Devo Max, Devo Manc, where we argued that what's needed is full devolution to the northern cities, the great city-states that powered our industrial revolution. And we argued for full devolution of all of the public spend in those areas. Push the state closest to those who can help. Let those local authorities rebase the state. Start again, dissolve the waste, the expenditure, the useless overhead, and create finally a state that might deliver for those that rely on it. And let's be clear, far too many of our people in the north particularly, and in other peripheral areas of our country, should be central. We need to create the same economic and social opportunities for them. We believe if we can reform the state, then people have a real chance. But what we haven't begun to reform is our economic offer. And there is no economic offer that can transform the north unless it's led first by infrastructure. Unless we can build the infrastructure in the north of our country, they are condemned to perpetual isolation, relative impoverishment, and a sense that if they have the children, it's imperative they must go to London. They must leave in order to prosper. And that creates an economy that's no longer successful, in my view. When you think of all of the capital spent unproductively in London on rents, on housing, and on the wages you must pay in order to meet those costs. That's an unproductive use of public investment. And we know from the evidence that's clear is Britain's second-tier cities perform far worse than their European counterparts. Munich, the gross value per head is over twice as much as Manchester. Even in Marseille, which I think you'll accept is in a worse performing economy in France, Marseille still has a gross value per added in the city a third higher than Manchester. And this is true elsewhere. And Manchester, by the way, is one of our best performing cities. Its growth rate in Greater Manchester is greater than that of Wales. That's the whole country of Wales. And its population of 2.7 million is larger than that of Northern Ireland. And it has less powers than either. And its growth rate also per capita is greater than that of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland combined. So what are we to do? What's the offer for the North? The offer for the North fundamentally has to be a transformation of its potential. Now, for me, there's only two choices. We either don't build HS2, or if we build it, the ultimate argument for HS2 is HS3. It's imperative and vitally important to the future of the north of this country that we have a high-speed rail going from Liverpool to Hull. If we can create that, that makes everything else worthwhile. Otherwise, if we just build HS2 as currently planned, what it will be is a valley that drains all the water from all the economies surrounding it. It will draw jobs, opportunities and businesses further away from the north down into the southeast. And the great benefit, in my view, will be Birmingham, because that's the ideal place to relocate. And already businesses are making decisions about winners and losers over HS2, and already our northern cities are losing potency and power as a result. But imagine if we created a genuine new infrastructure across the Pennines. It might be news, but I think to you, but don't you think we ought to have high-speed rail that links a port to Britain's greatest trading partner, the island of Ireland? We don't currently, on current plans, have a direct high-speed link to anywhere on the west coast of this country. And Liverpool is the largest city left out of the current HS2 plans. And the port of Liverpool is going to be a post-Panamax port. What does that mean? That means when the Panama Canal is widened, the port of Liverpool will be where cargo can go. And currently, in the other southern post-Panamax ports, 60% of the cargo that's landed there is used in the north of the country, in the north of England and in Scotland. Even on current figures that I think are far too conservative, the level of freight that will come from the post-Panamax port of Liverpool is thought to treble. And we have no coherent rail plans to deal with that increase in traffic. Now, the line from Liverpool to Manchester, where I believe we should start building HS3 before we start building HS2, because remember, as I said, the argument for HS2 is HS3. This has a higher rate of return, even on the models used by the Department of Transport. This alone is the most compelling branch of the line. And this is even with misreading the census, getting Liverpool's growth rates wrong, and getting the catchment area around Liverpool out by just over 1 million people. That is 1 million people less than actually live in the Liverpool city region. But these arguments don't just apply to the city of Liverpool, they apply right across the piece. Now, if we're going to have a northern super city, and I have to commend the Chancellor, and it's shocking that it's the Chancellor who has to come up with this when we've had parties for years sitting on the level of relative economic decline in the north. We do need a northern super city. We do need a rebalancing of our country so that jobs, opportunity, hope and growth can come back. And the best location for that city is between Liverpool and Manchester. Twice as many people travel between Liverpool and Manchester as do between Liverpool and Leeds. But this isn't an either-or argument. This is an argument for linking Liverpool with Manchester, Manchester not just with Leeds, but with Sheffield and ultimately on to Hull. And it was great to hear the head of HS2 talk about the new route that he's going to release in October being future-proofed, so we can build on connections to Bristol, so we can build on connections to all the towns and cities that will need it. Because unless we create HS2 and HS3 as a network we can link onto, and unless we can create financial options that make it viable, we're going to create a bit of infrastructure that will only make our country more unbalanced. So I personally believe we should start building from the north. And we build from the north downwards. It'll cost less, by the way. It's the most expensive stretch of HS2 is from London to Birmingham. Lots of tunnels. The further up the north you get, the less expensive it is to build. And so I think the opportunity for the Conservative Party is real, clear and evident. If it can create a genuine transformative offer for the North, which I think city-based devolution, led by people like Greg Clark, who's been in many ways not quite a lone visionary, but almost a visionary for the type of future that we desperately need to create for our northern cities. And if we can make an at-scale infrastructure offer for our northern cities, we can start to include them in the prosperity that we all enjoy. And what's more, the southeast will benefit as well, because we'll start to bleed off all of the unproductive costs of rent, rates, and crowding that cost so much to the bottom lines of our businesses and our households. So what I want to suggest to you is twofold. The old left offer of the state has failed and will fail. And the old right offer of the market will provide has failed and will fail the North. We desperately need a new model and a vision that isn't just empty words about rebalancing. We need a new constitutional offer, not just devolution to England, but devolution within England. Devolution downwards to our cities, so they don't have to come crawling to Whitehall to get funding and infrastructure that they desperately need in order to compete on the world markets. If we don't want to be party to the permanent impoverishment of our own country, if we don't want to create another Scotland of the North, i.e. another place where the Conservative Party doesn't have representation, and that is dangerous to a democracy. We need a plural settlement in our country so that all can benefit. It's imperative we recognise the need to build HS3 and to commit public money to that, because that will be part of the great Northern offer that both this party and the Labour Party need to do. This is what has been lacking for year upon year upon year. And if we can get the great northern cities together, and it's beginning, and recover something like the Council of the North that recognises all majorities will begin and end in the North. Because if Labour loses the North, there's no majority for them, and Conservatives need the North, because without the North they won't have a majority. That's a region that has power and potentiality. We've already got a generation of local visionary leaders. It's time that they were backed up by visionary politics for our northern localities by the great political parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Now, talking about those visionary leaders in the north, the man responsible for negotiating with them, these newly confident and ambitious northern cities, is the Minister for Cities, Greg Clark, who, as well as his very busy roles for dealing with universities and science, helps to lead on the city deals and on the various growth funds. Greg Clark.
Well, thanks, folks, and I'm grateful for you allowing me to gatecrash your meeting. But when there's been a lot of talk of defections this week in the air. When I saw Joe Anderson, the Mayor of Liverpool, striding across Finsbury Square with a delegate passer, I thought I had to come to hear his big announcement, which I dare say we're going to have in a few minutes. But I did want to come. It's supposed to be on another platform somewhere else, but I just wanted to come and welcome Joe to our conference. Joe is the first mayor for over a century, I think, elected mayor of Liverpool, and is, I think, I regard one of the signal achievements of our time in government that we recreated a mayoralty in Liverpool. It's always struck me that a place like Liverpool, and it extends to all of our great cities, for well over a century now, has been subject to power being stripped back from the city to Westminster and to Whitehall. Sometimes deliberately and nakedly, sometimes through the kind of bureaucratic deception that happens over the decades, whereby little by little the rules change and the discretion and the powers that were once vested in our great cities were taken away. So when I was asked by David Cameron a few years ago to become Minister for Cities, I had one requirement, one request, which was that we should be able to do things differently in different cities. We shouldn't have a lowest common denominator whereby everything had to be identical in all parts of the country. Because, here we are sitting in this great city of Birmingham, which is unique. You walk out there, if you put your head down and pass the library and enter into Victoria Square, there you see the council house and the town hall, monuments to the time when Birmingham led the country and Joseph Chamberlain had to think twice about responding to the call to join the cabinet and leave the great city of Birmingham. The same with Liverpool, the same with Manchester, the same with Leeds. We need to reflect the differences. And the 35 miles that distinguish geographically Liverpool from Manchester could lead no one to confuse the two cities. You're not going to stand at the pier head in Liverpool and think, perhaps I'm in Manchester. At every level, the culture, the history, the political character, the industries, the politics, to say nothing of the sporting and cultural differences of the city, mean that they're very distinct. And I think the establishment of the mayor of Liverpool has resulted in a new spring in the step for that city. There is an energy to the city of Liverpool now that is very palpable. They had a fantastic festival this summer, the International Festival of Business. Mayors from right across the world and international companies came to Liverpool. And I think one of the things that I pay tribute to Joe for doing in the early days of his mayoralty is recognising that if Liverpool is one of the most famous cities in the world. It doesn't have a problem in getting people in the furthest flung corners of the world to have heard of Liverpool. But actually, Liverpool and business are not, in recent decades, words that have gone closely together. So I think it was very prescient of Joe to say, what are we going to do with this mayoralty? Well, actually, we're going to attract the world's business to Liverpool, and we're going to send a clear message that actually Liverpool is open for business, and we're going to do business here. It was a fantastic success. I'm sure Joe will say something about that. But, and I'll just conclude by saying this, one of the hopes that we had for empowering our great cities is that they would be demanding, that they would march into Whitehall and into Downing Street. And rather than try to second guess what the government wants, they would do what Boris Johnson has been doing for the last few years and say what he wants and what London wants and what is right for their city. I'm pleased, and it's sometimes inconvenient for me, but I'm pleased to say that Joe very much embodies that. We've been able to do a city deal and a growth deal with Liverpool. I think it's been a tremendous help to the economic revitalisation of Liverpool, which is proceeding apace. But there's further to go, and the fact that Joe's marched into the Conservative conference with, and he's just given me, knowing that I've got to leave, he's given me his list of demands. I think that's all to the good. I want more places in the country to do precisely that. I may not be able to say yes to all of them, but I hope I'll be able to say yes to a good portion of them. And Phillip referred to the enthusiasm that the Chancellor has for doing something that I think is eminently within grasp, which is to create the connections between our northern cities in a way that is much deeper and literally faster than they have been for many years. Someone in an earlier meeting referred to the Trans-Pennine Express and the number of stops on the Trans-Pennine Express. I think the name Express, I think, breaches the Trade Subscriptions Act, and we ought to do something about this. But actually, I'll finish by saying this, if you think about London, think about travelling from East London to West London, perhaps from Ealing to Stratford. What do you say, about 45 minutes if you're on the tube, on the Central Line? But no one thinks that these are in a different city. It's easily possible to have that speed of connection between Liverpool, Manchester, and across the Pennines to Leeds. It might not take 45 minutes, but you can certainly go on to Hull. If you do that and you bring the glories of these great cities together, economic, population, cultural, universities, all within the same hop on the equivalent of a tube stop that we have in London, then this problem that the power of the northern cities has never been massed together to provide the rivalry and the complement to London, that is eminently within our grasp. So the Chancellor has got his weight behind making these connections. I will do, as Joe and Philip and everyone knows, I will do all that I can. I hope and I suspect that Joe's case will be very persuasive. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be here to hear it because I've got to be somewhere else, but I will read Joe's missive, and I've probably heard it before. But thanks for letting me pop in very briefly. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Greg. Our next speaker is...
It's the one on at one time.
Our next speaker is Lord Popat, who is a businessman and politician, and who in July 2010 became a member of the House of Lords when he became the first Gujarati to represent the Conservative Party in the Lords. He's the chairman of the Conservative Friends of India, but more importantly for today's discussion, he's also the Transport Whip in the Lords. Lord Popat.
Thank you for that kind words and kind introduction. In fact, we all heard George Osborne's speech this morning, and he talked about infrastructure investment and HS2. In fact, if you look at infrastructure investment, we are not a country that's very good at infrastructure investment. If you look at the Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum, we are ranked as 30th, despite being the 10th industrial country in the world. In fact, countries like Turkey built something like 1,400 miles of motorway, and we did very well. We did 46 miles, that's all. So let's talk about HS2. HS2, the good news about HS2, there's a cross-party agreement on HS2, and we will get on with it. HS2 is not about speed, it's about connecting our major cities, it's about capacity, it's about growth, it's about employment, it's about future prospects for our northern cities. although it will cost £42 billion over the next 20 years, it is a worthwhile investment, a worthwhile infrastructure investment for us. We haven't invested in the railways for the last 100 years since the Victorian times. And lately, my party has been good at investing in Crossrail, in upgrading our Thames Link, and of course, some of our rolling stocks are also come to the end of its useful life, and we replace those rolling stocks with new rolling stocks. But we genuinely need huge infrastructure investment for future growth if we are to compete in the global race. A large number of countries in the world are now investing hugely in infrastructure when it comes to roads, railways, airport, ports. We all need these to help to increase our export, and more important, to export and speed up the export that goes from this country to other parts of the world. Talking about exports, which is very important, and I'll talk when I come to HS3 why we want these northern cities to be connected, to bring that industrial hub in northern cities to help our future export. We as a country, for the last 40 years, we haven't got enough export to pay for imports. So year after year, we have about £70 billion trade deficit. And how do we finance this trade deficit? We finance this trade deficit by selling BAA and Cadbury Schweppes, and selling those houses and flats in the city of London to the Russians and the Indians. And of course, we regularly, well, week by week, we borrow money. And quite a lot of this lending is done to us by Qataris and others, so money keeps flowing in to the city of London. And this is how we are financing our shortfall on our exports. But I agree that the successive governments have failed the northern cities. Northern cities have huge potential. I mean, we have 250,000 graduates in and around Manchester, for example. And good news about northern cities lately is the politicians in northern cities are driving this forward. They're encouraging us, they want HS2. And what will happen, although HS3 is very much a floating idea, it's not a fixed idea, but it will be a natural progression from HS2 to HS3. And I agree, let HS3 come quicker than HS2 if possible, because we need to connect our major cities. And as the Chancellor said today, we want to create a northern powerhouse which can compete with London. All investment in infrastructure is in London. Not enough, we need to do a lot more. And HS3, by connecting these major cities, we'll be able to attract inward investment from abroad, to manufacture more, to sell more abroad, so we can balance our economy. I think what we also failed in doing, I come from a business background. I'm not a career politician, and if I were to rise above politics, I would frankly have an industrial policy, 30-year, 35-year investment policy. In business, we have long-range plan, and we have corporate plans.
Hold it next to your mouth.
In business, we have long-range plan and corporate plans. We plan 5 years ahead. We do the execution of those plans as quickly as possible. It's now better. Thank you. But I think we need to rise above politics, have this industrial policy. One of the benefits of HS2 and maybe eventually HS3, there's a cross-party agreement.
It's working.
There's a cross-party agreement on this, and we'll be able to do it. It is long overdue. As I said, sorry, it's not the mic, it's my mic.
It is working, so you need to speak like that.
Great. Okay, sorry about that. When I was in business, we had a 3-year or 5-year long-range plan, a corporate plan, and we made sure that decisions were made quick and execution even faster than the decision-making process. So I think we need an industrial policy. Within that industrial policy, what we need is infrastructure policy. With a cross-party agreement, election after election, each of those parties will put that in their manifesto. But this is a commitment we have given as a country, and we want to invest in infrastructure. It's only through investment in infrastructure we can rebalance the economy, we can bridge that gap between north and south quicker. And I welcome HS2, and hopefully it was a floating idea by George Osborne. He's a northern politician, luckily, and he can see the benefits northern cities will bring if we have HS3. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, our final speaker has already been introduced by all the other speakers, luckily, but suffice to say, Joe Anderson's been a councillor in Liverpool for 16 years. He was leader of the City Council, and then in 2012 received a stonking personal mandate with 60% of the vote to become directly elected mayor of Liverpool. Joe Anderson.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you for that. Can I just, obviously, Greg's left the room, but pay tribute to Greg for negotiating the City deal and the morality offer for Liverpool, which I was glad to accept, but also glad to deliver on. And I think one of the things that he gets, like most progressive politicians in both parties, understand the need for cities to become more self-reliant, more sustainable. And in order to do that, then we have to do things differently. And that's one of the things that not only does Greg get, but I think the Chancellor understands and gets themselves. And it's great that also the government have worked with Liverpool in the International Festival of Business in 2014. We've already got the go-ahead from government to have the International Festival of Business in Liverpool in 2016. We will announce shortly through government, and government will make the announcement, literally millions and millions of pounds worth of business and new business opportunities as a result of the International Festival of Business. So for me, as I said, it's great to be here. It's great to speak to people who want to listen to the debate around seriously rebalancing the economy. And for me, you know, it really is simple. I look at the situation in the UK as cities, the great cities in the UK, all being magnets in terms of, and all being powerhouses. And if you have so many magnets, you've got to make sure that they have equal powers. Otherwise, some have more strength than others and more power, and will suck the life out of the other magnets. And the second tier cities, for so long now, whatever party, have been really undervalued. And if we're serious about economic growth in our cities, in the north, but equally, and it's important that we recognise this, because Liverpool and the north isn't disconnected from the rest of the UK, it's part of the UK. So it's important that the north grows in order to help UK PLC. And that's why the arguments around HS2 and HS3 is hugely important for growth for the whole country. And one of the things that I did and upset my own party, along with other leaders in the north, was to argue the case for HS2. The absurdity of a political party arguing in the House of Commons for growth to get us out of austerity. And then when we talk about infrastructure investment as HS2, they were saying, well, whoa, let's not talk about that. And I criticised their balls, and I criticised the Labour Party, not only for not getting right behind HS2, but not taking the opportunity to talk about HS3. Because HS2, the problem with HS2 and the debate around HS2 is that we were talking always about high speed. And it isn't just about speed. It is much, much more than that. And if I had a real choice, I would, and a choice between whether we had HS2 or HS3, I would have gone for HS3 first before HS2. But the argument for HS2, as Phillip says, is HS3. Because if we want to avoid, and it's absolutely pertinent for everybody in this room and everybody who was in Manchester, or anybody, I don't know which phone box the Liberal Democrats are having their conference in, but wherever that is, that everybody talks about, and everybody understands the real need for connectivity, the real need for us to embrace that connectivity and that investment that is crucially needed. Now, obviously, the debate around the devolution agenda is important, but the reason why we got to the state and we got to the position where we nearly lost Scotland was because of that disaffection, because of that disconnect. And it's incumbent on you, on me, on all people that want and have influence to actually use that to make sure that we actually make a difference to northern cities so we're not faced with that disconnect again. And that's crucially important to me. And that's why my appeal is not if political or party political. It is simply to allow cities like Liverpool to be involved in the regeneration and the growth of the UK. Now, let me just make a couple of quick points in regards, because a lot of stuff Phillip said, a lot of stuff Greg said, and the noble lord around why it's important. It's important for a number of reasons, because if we don't invest in our infrastructure and connectivity, our European competitors and competitors across the world are doing exactly what we should be doing. And so it's vitally important. And I think we've actually now grasped that. So we need to move on. And the case for Liverpool is quite simply a powerful case. Economically, it's a no-brainer. It is absolutely there for everybody to see in terms of the growth, the number of jobs, GVA, all of the indices that we know will happen are there for everybody to see. That's why businesses are behind my campaign, ResPublica's campaign, along with others, to actually make sure that that 20 miles, because that's what we're talking about, 20 miles from Crewe into Liverpool is made. Because we're going to have to invest in Liverpool in a new line street to accommodate the trains. Millions of pounds we're going to have to invest in that particular area. So it's the economics of the madness not to then make sure that the extra 20 miles in terms of track, the high-speed connection, the extra capacity for freight isn't delivered. It's absolutely madness not to consider it. And let me make another point for the reason why. Liverpool, 100 years ago, half of the world's trade used to come through our city. We were indeed the first city that had a train running from Liverpool to Manchester. We've now we are investing, as we speak, £300 million, £320 million in a super port, a deep sea berth and port. So we'll be able to accommodate the biggest ships that come into our country in the northwest. 90% of the freight that comes in to the north, Birmingham northwards, comes through the south and is then transported northwards. It's fantastic. Now, if you talk about the green agenda, we talk about environment and stuff, whatever, it is, again, absolutely essential that we recognise that fact and therefore have the west-east connectivity. And not just west-east. It's about connecting to Edinburgh. It's about connecting to Glasgow. It's about making our great cities connected. And the Conservative Party or progressives in all parties have a real opportunity to champion and make that case. And if we're investing, as Phillip mentioned, about the growth in the superport, it's going to create over 5,000 jobs, but it's going to quadruple the amount of freight that comes into our city. And we've got to get it out. We've got to make sure that we're able to transport that. And it isn't just, and that's why the Chancellor has accepted the One North proposals, and I'm delighted that he has, because we need to look at multimodal ways of getting that freight out. So for me, the case for HS3 and the case for HS2 is overwhelming. Absolutely overwhelming, irrespective of what party you come from, because it's important for the growth, not just of Liverpool, not just for the Northwest, but the whole of the UK. And I'd ask you to urge everybody, when you meet them, to make sure that you passionately argue that case for the whole of the UK. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Joe.
Just go for a question.
I think we'll go straight to some questions from the audience, please. We'll take 3 at a time, if that's okay. Chap here at the front.
Florian Bay from South
Here
East London.
you go. It does work. You just need to have it close to your mouth.
I can speak very loudly
No,
if need be. But
It's for people in the room.
thanks, Philip.
Close to your mouth.
Florian Bay, currently living in South East London, but I've lived in the north. And I have to say, I emphasise fully with what you've said. I've lived in Liverpool, I've lived in Glasgow. It's the same feelings of despair. It's not a Scot against the English scene. It's the fact that the north of Britain has been abandoned for decades, effectively. Now regarding high speed 2 and high speed 3, I'm all in favour of that, but there is a risk with high speed train of designing them poorly, like they've done in France, of not designing them as high speed train, but as effectively tracked airplanes. If we look at high speed 2 in Birmingham, New Street Station, would high speed 2 be going to New Street Station? No. Therefore, the connectivity opportunities are missed. Crewe. The station has been added in Crewe as a late add-on. I'm glad to say it's not been approved. Manchester, it's going to be the same. Manchester Airport, not the same station. I'm all in favour of high speed 2 and high speed 3, but if we must do so, we must design them properly as an add-on to the national rail network, as the keystone, if you want, and not as a tracked airplane like we are doing now.
Okay. Sorry, Hannah will take it.
Next question. Right at the back.
Sorry, Hannah.
Thank you. My name is Moderation Alliance. Welcome to Birmingham. Birmingham's going to win the HS2. We're going to have it first. It's very, very important for this city that we deliver quickly and efficiently on that project. It doesn't need to be 2026, it should be 2020. Let's get on with it. Let's move on. Let's do it, and let's move it up to the north after that, because we believe in HS2, believe in connectivity of cities, but Birmingham will win this race. We've got to do that. Thank you.
That's a nice shared agenda.
And lady at the back.
In the meantime, panel, could you explain to me if you have any plans for the people that want to go between these places by car? What are you going to do to relieve the congestion on the M6? Everybody is a rag by the time they get north. Any day between Thursday and Tuesday.
Thank you. That's all for now, yeah. Joe, the One North proposals obviously include some proposals for highways as well as rail, but it's rail we're here to talk about today. I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, only to quickly say, I actually believe that both parties fail in terms of having a national transport policy that looks at multimodal effects. You're absolutely right that the One North plan. I went to the conference only one day to speak at a ResPublica event in Manchester from Liverpool. It takes normally, well, it should do, and on Sundays you can do Liverpool to Manchester in 40 minutes. On the Monday that I went to that event, it took 1 hour 45 minutes. It's absolute madness that we have to address those issues, and the One North plan does talk about that as well. So it isn't just rail; it is about other forms of transport too.
Well, if I just take three different questions with a different response. In fact, yes, the design of the train, what the French have gone through, we will make sure that we get better design. I mean, we have Hitachi who will come to UK, Darlington, to set up a train factory. We will look at their design too. I'm glad there's overwhelming support there on HS2. And it's important we do it quicker. The way the process works, the number of legislation that's going to go through the Parliament before we start work on HS2, but the groundwork has started. And maybe, in fact, earlier it was quoted about HS3, the benefits HS3 will bring, probably bigger benefits than HS2 maybe. So I think we should wait for David Higgins' report, and if we say so, I'm sure the government will take action, because we have overwhelming support from politicians of those major cities. And the mayor of Liverpool plays a very important role with his colleagues in there. Yes, congestion. In fact, as I said, we haven't invested in infrastructure on our transport, roads, railways, airports, ports, you name it. But we are investing £186 million in this year to improve 30 schemes that will reduce congestion, including the widening of M6 at junction 32. And the number of other schemes we might be seeing works happening on A14, on A1, M1 junction 19. So I think we've identified huge capital investment over the next 5 to 10 years to make sure that we have enough roads for our cars. And congestion is a major problem, cost a fortune to the economy and to individuals. And we want to make sure that we further improve our roads.
Thank you. I was at a talk presentation to the course Cities last week with David Higgins, and he said something I found quite reassuring, because what he picked up on was that every city will want to be connected to the high-speed rail network because the penalty for not being connected is so extremely high. And what he was talking about is the need to design the route for HS2 such that it's future-proof, such that cities like Bristol can connect, such that we go to the west of Manchester Airport, so Liverpool can connect as well. And I think that's the type of vision we need, though I must say it's a bit bonkers that we then have to get off at Euston and trek across to St Pancras to get to France, but maybe that's another issue entirely. I mean, there should be barriers between us and the French, but perhaps not one that involves us trekking across central London with our luggage. But leaving that aside, I think the missing element now is for government to create the right tax incentives for cities to make a contribution. We've had Crossrail that essentially is subsidised by a levy on rateable value on business premises over a certain size. And that's worked incredibly well. And what we need is individual cities to think about how they might get some value out of an increase in land values. And by the way, the areas that benefit most from an increase in land values are those areas that are actually very poor in terms of value. That's where you get the greatest increase. So if we can think innovatively about capturing that increase and using that to fund infrastructure, and if the government thinks creatively about that, we can also slash dramatically the cost of this sort of infrastructure. And every city will need to be linked to this high-speed network. And we've got to have east-west links. And unless we build that in, we'll create too many losers and too few winners. So whilst I'm all in favour of Birmingham, I don't believe we should have one city first. I think all of our cities have to be first. And that's the only future a political party that cares about this country should be thinking of. See you later.
I'll just make the point as well that it's fantastic to see how we're not really having to discuss the technical or engineering feasibility of this project. We've come so far when rail has undergone such a renaissance that it's perfectly feasible, as everybody has said. And even the most complex bit, which would be tunnelling the Transpennine, thanks to Crossrail, thanks to HS2, Britain is becoming a leader in tunnelling technology and expertise. A few more questions. Gentleman standing.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Fall, it's a cheeky question for you, Joe, really. The Conservative Party gets business, and we heard the Chancellor, we need to generate profit so that we can pay for our services. Do you think that you would have seen a Labour government do what we've already done over the last 4 or 5 years? And an even cheekier question, when are you going to cross the floor?
I think that probably needs an immediate response.
Well, in fairness to the question around the position with regards to investment and the way the government has set out the investment in terms of the city deals and stuff like that, I do think that there are a few people in the Labour Party who get that. Andrew Adonis, for instance, is one who works closely with who works with people, and I guess I think there's a real window of opportunity now to seriously talk about devolvement and decentralisation of funding to cities. We talk about localism. The Conservative Party created the issue of localism, but if we're serious about it, we've got to allow cities like Liverpool to have place-based budgets so that if we make savings and we're competing against each other, we can invest that money we save to create business, to create growth. I know in Liverpool, it's the argument that I have, I won't make political points, but we are all different in terms of cities as well. And there has to be a recognition of that. The very idea that I want to return Liverpool back to the 80s and the militant-dominated era is just a nonsense. The damage that was done by that. But the reality is I want my city to grow, and I want our city and my city to be a city that is sustainable, that doesn't rely on grant handouts, but can actually grow its business base and create more jobs. It's not rocket science that we have welfare problems because we haven't got people with the skills, the opportunities. But I know where those growth opportunities are going to come in my city. Each city has different potential for growth. We're not all the same. We all can't have manufacturing industries coming out of our ears. But the reality is that localism means that we know better where those growth areas are and where our strengths are. And I think, all credit to Greg Clark, I think George Osborne is another champion of that. And there's a few people, as I said, in both parties that are progressive enough to actually articulate that and across the divide, and that's why I'm here. I know that you know that you want the same thing as I want, and that is less dependency on grants and more business. That's what I want. Exactly the same. With regards to crossing the floor, I'd rather upset people on both sides. And believe you me, I do that. I've got more Conservative ministers' numbers in that phone than I have Labour. And that's for the camera.
Thanks, Joe. We'll take one question from each side. The lady here with a hand up.
Thank you. I'm a councillor for Cheshire East Council, and I live very close to Crewe. My own feeling is that perhaps we're missing another trick here. If we believe what we've been hearing today, that we need that third HS2, and I think perhaps we do, we ought to really start this whole business, and I say this advisedly, at Crewe, with the hub and spoke design, so that we can go to Birmingham from Crewe, that we have the infrastructure there that will take us to Liverpool, that will take us to Manchester, but which will also allow the electrification of those lines that will link us with the West and with Stoke-on-Trent and with places like Bristol and Cardiff and Swansea and of course with Anglesey. We need to be sure that all our infrastructure there is ready to go, not simultaneously, I appreciate that, but by starting at Crewe, you speed the process up and absolutely bring it forward to 2020. We need to get on with it.
Yeah. Thank you. And over here, the gentleman here.
Michael Flynn from Edisbury. Before I continue on that, I suppose I'm a railway engineer. I run major projects around the world. And I was expecting to disagree with an awful lot that I heard today. But I didn't. I agree with virtually every single word you said. I just take issue with a couple of minor points. One is building from north to south, which is a lovely idea, but unfortunately the passenger flows aren't sufficient to justify it. And the point I'd like to make to you, Joe, and welcome to the Heart of Darkness, it's good to see you here. I didn't ever think I'd see this day. Many years ago, I was preferred bidder for Merseytram, the operations contract for the Merseytram. And my experience of the councils in Greater Liverpool, in Merseyside, Greater Liverpool they don't like very much, is that they fought like cats in a sack. And they would disagree with each other, very often for the sake of disagreeing with each other, because ideas weren't originated in their particular location. Can we realise this vision of M62ville when our great cities themselves very often can't agree with the local authorities that we have within them?
Okay, so first this hub and spoke model, which is an idea that people in some cities love, some rail planners love, but historically the British public doesn't tend to like changing trains very much. They tend to do everything they can to get direct trains. That's always been the problem with selling that idea. But the idea of starting at Crewe or north to south, Philip, where do we start?
Well, I'm route agnostic because I think the important thing politically is to establish the principle. If we go for a route before the studies and before the judgments, we'll just create planning blight, needlessly angry people, and that's not the way to get things done. What we need is a commitment in principle that is route agnostic. And that, I think, is what allows us to move forward and do the long-term work and planning that's required. And what I'd like to do, what we at ResPublica will do, is two things. First of all, we'll organise with Labour MPs in Liverpool, but we'll also go along the whole HS3 route from Liverpool to Hull and try to organise all the MPs along that line, predominantly Labour, but not exclusively, to create political support within that party for this type of development, to essentially bring the North back into the prosperity it should rightfully enjoy. Secondly, I'll work within the Conservative Party, and we already have very good lines into number 10, and I will go to them and I'll tell you what I'm going to say to them in private meetings. This is your chance to re-establish a Conservative foothold in the North. And for too long you've let it wither on the vine, and people in the North have the idea that actually you hold them in contempt. And I'm afraid to say there's reason for that belief. So let's change that. Let's create an at-scale offer that will really transform outcomes for people in the North. And yes, let's move away from the wrong sort of public expenditure that doesn't change lives and outcomes, but let's have the expenditure that does. Let's use the savings we're creating to create genuine wealth in the future for the people of our country. And I think that will have quite a strong positive reaction. And I think also within the Labour Party, I'll say this is your majority as well. And to people of the North, I'd say wake up and realise majorities are made and lost in your region. You have more political power than you realise, because everyone's got to make it where you are, or they don't make it into number 10. And it's about time. It's not just a Liverpool problem, though there is a problem in Liverpool with a tendency, an inbuilt tendency to fight that I think has been pretty fatal to the city's prospects. It's also, oddly, we don't work well across northern cities together for whatever reason, because we can't kind of conceive there's a common interest when there clearly is. Take Bowland Shale, for instance. The proof that God is an Englishman and lives in the north is the fact that we have shale gas reserves that literally dwarf most reserves elsewhere on the earth. And imagine with that level of low-cost energy, the industrial renaissance we could pilot in those places that have been shattered by industry leaving them. Think what we could do to broker industry's return. So there's an enormous future there. Get the infrastructure right, get the investment right, create a pro-business environment, and it could turn around quite dramatically. But we're going to organise politically in order to achieve what we believe in, which is a Britain where everyone can flourish.
Thanks, Phillip.
And that includes Birmingham.
Councils fighting like cats and dogs. I mean, Joe, the cities across the north are allies on this foot at the moment, but you're obviously competitors as well when it comes to attracting inward investment and infrastructure spending. How do you make sure you stay together?
Well, I mean, Michael, you mentioned the tram in Liverpool, and you're absolutely right. But my argument is that if we'd have had a directly elected mayor, a metro mayor, then there wouldn't have been any arguments. It would have happened. So that's my argument in regards to that, because it takes a. Look, there's nothing wrong with competition, but you have to understand that the best way to deliver real change. I mean, in Liverpool, in the city region, often Manchester, it does. We've got more in common with Manchester than there's nothing. There's less divide us than there's a lot that unites us in Manchester. And one of the things, though, that does frustrate me about Manchester is Manchester's had the combined authority for a long time, probably around about 14 years. And so Manchester, when we talk about Manchester, is often Greater Manchester. Media City, for instance, is not in Manchester, it's in Salford. in Greater Manchester. So we often confuse that. Liverpool is doing really well, on its own, without our near neighbours, as dear as I love them all. But the reality is that we can get stronger, get better. We speak for 1.4 million, our city region. It's a bigger GVA than Wales. So it's a real opportunity for us to grow. It's a real opportunity, HS2 and HS3, and everybody's got to realise that we will benefit. Each of those constituencies that make up the Liverpool city region will benefit from the jobs. 70% near enough of the people that work in Liverpool, in the city centre, come from outside of Liverpool. They come from Sefton, neighbourhood Sefton, from Wirral, and so I don't mind that, because as long as there's jobs being created in Wirral that other people get from living in Liverpool, that's fine by me. And I think we've got to recognise that, and ditch the parochialism and make sure that we look at the vision for everybody. And I think we're getting there. I think there's a real understanding of that. And that's why I mentioned this as a window of opportunity, the devolution, the decentralisation debate.
I'd like to see you as mayor of a greater Liverpool.
Well, I've been arguing that for 14 years. I mean, seriously, I have. I mean, when the Labour government introduced the Local Governments Act, and there was talk, you could have the opportunity of a mayor and cabinet model or a leader and cabinet model. And one of the reasons why I went for the city mayor was because I wasn't going to be held back by members of the local authorities that are, again, partners. But incidentally, the leader of Wirral, who was a Conservative at the time, was against combined authority. So held it back for 5 years again, because we wanted that. But seriously, the offer for the future of Liverpool and the city region, everybody, is to work together.
Any more questions? There's a chap here.
Councillor Johnny Barton, I live about a mile north of the disaster zone of Euston. I totally agree with everything you said about regalvanising the north. My wife is a woollyback, so there was a joke in our family. My son took my profession, my religion, and when it came to the football team, it had to be Liverpool. You can't take the girl out.
Good man, good man.
But at this point, I usually get bottled out of the room, because regalvanising the north to take pressure off the south. We are like rats in a cage in London. London is full. Every pub is being turned into luxury flats. At this point, I get bottled off, because I just don't believe that hurtling up to the north on a high-speed rail link alongside an existing fast rail link is the solution. But I'd like to hear your wish list, Joe, for Liverpool, apart from high-speed rail, what you think Liverpool needs to make it a stand-alone city. So kids born in Liverpool, as you rightly say, or any other northern city, have an equal opportunity to kids born in London. Because at the moment, everyone's just piling into London. The north needs to have stand-alone cities. What's your solution?
Okay, well, listen, what I'll do is me and you'll have a pint after this and we'll spend 2 hours. In all seriousness, that one of the papers that I've just given to Greg was about the devolution agenda and about the metro mayors and about more powers for Liverpool. Look, I can say to you that I can, basically I want the freedom to be able to generate money, to create jobs, create growth, new houses, all of the things that will help us become more sustainable. And if for instance, 92%, get this, and it's a fact, 92% of the taxes raised in Liverpool is taken away from us. And then it's devolved back in grant form. Yeah? Now, if we can keep some of that funding, and there's then a competition about how you use that, and you're held accountable to how you spend that and how you create growth. It's like the business rates, isn't it? If we're able to keep our business rates and grow businesses, and we get more money, then we invest that and you grow more and you're more competitive. Exactly what you believe in, exactly what I believe in. It comes back to my point before about needing to be more sustainable. so that we're not reliant on government grants or assistance or welfare. But you know, the argument about welfare, I've been negotiating with the Conservative government for the last 2 years about creating a welfare to work programme in Liverpool, where we take the risk, Liverpool takes the risk, but we incentivise and give opportunities for people who are in the poverty trap. We give them some money to actually get them into work, but at the end of 2 years, they've got a job. I know where the growth areas are, I know where the businesses are that will take them. So locally, I can do something about it. There's many things. Of course, I want to retain more students in Liverpool, but in order to do that, I need jobs. I need the pharmaceutical industries, the bioscience and technology industries in Liverpool to be strong and competitive with the South. So, you know, it seriously isn't one particular issue. It's about giving us the ability to shape and do things, create and shape our own destiny in the city. And that can only come from devolution and decentralisation of powers and resources. That's what happens in the modern world, for Christ's sake. You only have to go, you know, to Europe. You only have to go to you know, America, and you see cities being allowed to retain a lot of the taxes themselves, to spend in the way they see fit, and the leaders of those cities are held accountable democratically, and if they don't get it right, they get voted out. Now, what's wrong with that? It's good enough for Boris. Why isn't it good enough for me and other parts of the UK? So it's a lot of things like that, but seriously, you know, we're not on the same line maybe, but we're on the same paragraph and the same page.
Last question.
Yeah. Thank you. Ray Burston from Halzone, just up the road here. Obviously, what's happened in the referendum over the last few weeks has changed everything. People say that, you know, things can never go back to being the same again. And as now it's accepted, you know, that England is going to get one way or the other, the devolution that it should have had all along. And as the government scratches around to find a means to do that, do you not agree that the means are already there, English local authorities, to devolve powers, as Joe was saying?
Quick last thought on that, Philip?
Yeah, I mean, ResPublica has published the most detailed study of what place-based devolution is that has yet been published. It's here, it's free for you all to download. Just go onto our website, it's completely free. This is the way we begin. Full place-based devolution.
Excuse me, could you quote down at the back?
Full place-based devolution of public services spend. Integration of public services. When we have that, then we can localise taxation, because then taxation is related to the level of services you receive. Then we can have self-sustaining cities. And as soon as we have self-sustaining cities, we can have prosperity. The evidence is quite striking, and I think it's clear. The more autonomy cities have, the more prosperous they are. And Britain has the least autonomous cities in Europe and indeed in the developed Western world. And we have to free our cities to make the differences that only they can make. And they can stand or fall by that. And if we have direct elections into these new combined authorities, the mayors can stand or fall by that. And that's what we need.
Joe wants a quick last word on that.
Yeah, do you know, it's a really good question. And it comes down to me, and I can understand why government rightly argue for a modernisation of local governance. And I'll tell you for why. It's absolutely, if I'm serious here, and I'm saying to you, and let me just say to you, all of you are now in the cabinet, and I'm making an appeal as a city leader, or saying to you, I want more powers, and I want more resources, and I want more devolution. I want that. So you're going to say to me, okay, Joe, what if we give you that? That means that you're going to ask for, you know, we have a turnover in Liverpool of about £1.3 billion a year. It's not a lot, but it's 1.3 billion. I'm in control of that, and I'm in charge of that. If I want that to increase to 4 billion, I want the welfare to work, the job centre plus money, so I can look at the skills where we need them and do that. So I want housing spending. So I want those other areas of spend, that devolution, that decentralisation. Surely governments should expect, rightly so, that there's a modern professional form of governance. That, if you like, they can be secure in the knowledge that we're going to do it. Why should it be part-time councillors who are going to be in control of these billions of pounds? It's not right, it's not modern, and it's not democratic, and it's not efficient. So we have to change in order to do that. And that's why I fully support the modernisation agenda, because, and as Phillip said, control of your own destiny through the ballot box means you're accountable. And if you're not delivering, my manifesto says 11 new schools, 2 new primary schools, 5,000 jobs, 5,000 houses, 20,000 jobs, and we're well on the way to delivering that. What's wrong with being bold and passionate and delivering it? And if you can't, you get voted out if it's not good enough, in the same way government does every single 5 years, or 4 as it used to be, or whatever they wanted when it used to be. But now it's changed, and that's, if it's good enough for central government, it's good enough for local government too.
Thanks, Joe. And I just want to thank everybody for coming to what I think has been a fantastic debate, and ask if I can ask you to show your appreciation for our speakers.